Tonight,
The trade tensions are flaring up between the U.S. and China.
with President Trump upping the pressure for a trade deal with China,
President Trump announcing plans to increase tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods.
Frontline and NPR correspondent Laura Sullivan investigate.
China is going to be the #1 market from any perspective.
For GE or for everybody?
For everybody.
The forces behind the conflict.
We're not in a trade war, we're in a techonomic war.
Do you think that Americans should be worried?
Oh, yes, I think so.
And what's at stake?
Tariffs announced by the Trump administration.
China is now punching back.
China has a 10-year, 20-year, 50-year plan.
We do have a chance to see the new Cold War. I think it's a comprehensive confrontation. That's dangerous.
Tonight on Frontline, Trump's trade war.
One of the things that President Trump believes, he believes in this totally, is that personal relationships of great powers can make a difference.
The president's face-to-face for the first time.
There was a lot of time in the schedule with them literally one-on-one being together and creating the relationship that the two big economies needed to have with each other.
The leaders seemed to connect, and so did the families.
We wanted to make you feel at home. Hello, how are you?
That summit was important because the two leaders established a strong personal relationship.
We've had a long discussion already, and so far I have gotten nothing, absolutely nothing. But we have developed a friendship, I can see that.
Thank you.
We say, okay, you see, President Trump is a president that we can work with, and he is someone that we can talk to. He's a reasonable leader, and maybe he can do something the ordinary, conventional U.S. leader won't do. So the expectation was very high, and the hope was maybe they can control the situation, and they can work together to solve the problem gradually.
But long-standing problems between the countries were reaching a crisis. And despite the promising start and all the optimism,
I believe lots of very potentially bad problems will be going away, so...
within a year, Trump would turn on Xi, imposing billions of dollars in tariffs and leading the United States into a perilous confrontation.
The fights were nasty. They came out of Mar-a-Lago. The most intense fights and debates in the White House were about this issue of tariffs, but tariffs as a proxy to the great economic war with China that we're engaged in. There's no middle ground. One side's going to win and one side's going to lose, and so we knew the stakes were high.
On the front line of the rapidly escalating trade war, American companies are bracing for battle.
Last fall, I headed to southwestern Ohio. President Trump had fired the first shots in his trade war with tariffs on a wide array of imported Chinese goods, from electronics to furniture to steel.
President Trump turns up the heat on China.
The tariffs on imported steel were particularly welcome news to struggling communities like Middletown, where I met up with some steel workers at a local coffee shop.
Here, there used to be a mall down here. We had 3 city parks with 3 city pools. Now there's none.
What did you think when you first heard that Trump was putting tariffs on steel?
I felt it was, it was about time. I've watched the farmers get their subsidies. I've watched the banks bail out, the automotive industry bail out, and I've just watched us wither on the vine for the last 30 years.
Do you think it's going to help the town? Do you think it's going to help your hometowns?
Absolutely.
What are you expecting to see?
Everybody always talks about jobs in America, and we hear that all the time. We want to see that reality happen. You can't just depend on foreign countries for steel. We've got to make it in the United States.
We just want China to play by the rules.
Right.
That's it. We don't want to bail out.
So you're saying it's not that you want your industry propped up.
No, not at all.
No.
You want your industry...
A level playing field.
You want a level
That's all we
playing
want.
field. President Trump was all in on the tariff strategy. It's a strategy he's been talking about for years, as far back as the late 1980s, when he first tested the possibility of becoming president.
Our guest, the famed developer Donald Trump of New York.
Back then, Trump's target was Japan and its trade practices.
The fact is that you don't have free trade. We think of it as free trade, but you right now don't have free trade. And I think a lot of people are tired of watching other countries ripping off the United States. This is a great country.
He believed from the beginning that there's really nothing worse than being laughed at.
They laugh at us. Behind our backs, they laugh at us because of our own stupidity.
And he came to see the Japanese as laughing at the United States, at taking advantage of the United States by stealing the jobs, by dumping product here.
We let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible.
After Japan's economy cratered, Trump shifted his ire to a rising economic power, China.
They are ripping us like we've never been ripped before. If you look at Japan, if you look at China, where we lose $100 billion a year with China.
Trump headed to Beijing in November 2017. It was a royal welcoming. Filled with pomp and ceremony. And the two leaders seemed ready to work together. Their negotiators agreed on a plan for China to buy billions of dollars in U.S. products like beef and natural gas. But behind the celebrations, Trump's nationalists had devised a different plan.
We had a couple of tricks up our sleeves. Vara and I started to dust off the secret weapon we had to call a national security emergency, kind of what we're doing on the border right now. To use the national security emergency powers that are invested in the Defense Department to really start to go after steel, aluminum, maybe autos, but eventually technology. It's time to get it on.
By March 2018, the president was ready to take action.
Thank you very much, everyone. We have with us the biggest steel companies in the United States. They used to be a lot bigger. Next week, we'll be imposing tariffs on steel imports and tariffs on aluminum imports.
What was the reaction?
The reaction was surprise.
It'll be 25% for steel. It'll be 10% for aluminum.
This moment was a seminal moment in trade policy because it's the most aggressive use of this kind of trade law approach ever. This is done under the theory of national security.
We need it. We need it even for defense, if you think. I mean, we need it for defense. We need great steel makers.
Steel was important to our national security broadly, military, critical infrastructure, and the economy as a whole. And that had never been done before.
President Trump turning tough trade talk into action.
New tariffs announced by the Trump administration on $50 billion worth of Chinese exports.
China is now punching back with an equal amount of tariffs on American exports.
President Trump has just slapped tariffs on another $200 billion of Chinese exports,
igniting the biggest trade war in economic history.
China is going to be the #1 market from any perspective. And
for GE or for everybody?
For everybody.
But U.S. companies have long complained about an economic strategy that China does use. They say it gives Chinese businesses an unfair advantage in the industrial port city of Guangzhou. This economic strategy is called the China model.
The China model is a blend between national control and ownership of resources and economic activities dominated by private entrepreneurs. 90% of the new jobs are in the private sector. But all the land is still owned by the state. Control of energy resources controlled by the state. Control of the financial system, basically by the state. So you come up with this socialism with Chinese characteristics, or socialist market economy, which is what China calls itself.
The question is American complaint about the way China handles its economy, or is about China's legitimacy to become a prosperous and powerful country? Our population is 4 times bigger than the US. We have 1.3 billion people, right? You have 300 million people. So China's economy should be 4 times higher than the US economy. Now we are only
difficult for people in the United States to accept.
Yeah, of course, I know this is difficult to accept, at least as powerful as the US and even one day much powerful than the U.S.
Do you think that Americans should be worried?
Oh, yes, I think so.
Yes, they should.
You know,
But back in the U.S., Trump was eager to escalate the tariff fight.
Thank you very much.
In the fall of 2018, he upped the ante by threatening even more tariffs. Trump's position was that it was time to hit back, and that prior administrations have been too soft on China. One of the biggest problems the U.S. has had with China over the years is what's come to be known as forced tech transfer, where companies wanting to do business in China say they're pressured to give up their technology.
China started adopting what were called indigenous innovation policies to make sure that their own companies, state-owned or otherwise, were going to be the ones who really were the leaders in the new economy.
So you're saying they didn't compete fair?
They engaged in predatory and protectionist policies. They demanded that many foreign companies seeking to come into their market had to do it through joint ventures with their own firms, and in many cases requiring that their technology be transferred to empower Chinese entities to become, great world companies.
Publicly, China would promise to open its markets more to U.S. business.
The new Chinese leaders revealed.
But internally, it would double down on the China model.
China needs to learn more about the world. The world also needs to learn more about China.
And under Xi Jinping, it embraced an ambitious national plan called Made in China 2025 that put even more focus on dominating key global industries. But early on, U.S. businesses discovered China was also using other means to get ahead.
In early January of 2010, I get a call from Google, who had just announced that they've been hacked.
Google traced the sabotage back to China.
In the course of their investigation, they actually realized that there were many more companies that had been targeted.
Not only was Google itself targeted by the cyber spies, but so were at least 20 other major corporations.
You thought at that time, this is something bigger.
For the first time ever, we were facing a nation state, an intelligence service that was breaking into companies, not governments, not militaries, but private sector organizations.
In all, more than 72 organizations were hacked by spies dating back to 2006.
The Google hack led to revelations about dozens of other Chinese cyber attacks.
Dubbed Operation Shady Rat. Is it coming from one particular place?
And Alperovich was called to the White House Situation Room to brief Obama's top national security officials.
I briefed them on what we were seeing with both Aurora, Night Dragon, Shady Rat.
What did they say?
My impression was none of this was a surprise. And when I pressed them on why they were not taking stronger action against China, their response was, it's complicated.
It's complicated. Did they explain that?
Well, they were telling me straight out, those same customers that are getting victimized by China, they're the same companies that are coming in to tell us, don't do anything to harm the relationship with China. We want to continue doing business there. We want to continue making money there. We need that market.
You know, the U.S. government listens to companies. So if the companies are saying chill, they'll chill.
How can businesses walk into United States agencies and complain about being treated unfairly if they're the ones that are preventing any action from being taken? How do they get to have it both ways?
Sometimes two things can be true at the same time. I mean, their incentives are to make money. If your business is in China, Xi Jinping is more important to you than Donald Trump or Barack Obama.
Neither Google nor any of the other companies we contacted about cyber attacks would agree to talk to us. And Chinese officials deny they've been involved in such practices. But by 2015, American businesses and government officials were increasingly alarmed. In negotiations with President Obama, Xi pledged that China would not engage in economic cyber hacking.
I believe that we have made significant progress.
Trump quickly withdrew from the TPP agreement. And by the fall of 2018, with his own trade negotiations stymied, the conflict was widening. The administration took a tough turn, confronting China aggressively.
Releasing a new report tonight detailing just how big the threat China poses.
It accused China of breaking the cyber agreement
Chinese intel officers charged with hacking U.S. businesses
and engaging in widespread technology
This
theft.
latest indictment adds to the growing tension between the U.S. and China in the middle of this fierce trade war.
Now, through the Made in China 2025 plan, the Communist Party has set its sights on controlling 90% of the world's most advanced industries.
Really an extraordinary speech attacking China on the domestic politics front, the trade front, and the military front.
Chinese security agencies have masterminded the wholesale theft of American technology.
They don't want to wait 20 more years to catch up. They're just reaching into the cookie jar and taking whatever they want.
And using that stolen technology, the Chinese Communist Party is turning plowshares into swords.
That speech was not a hawkish speech. That speech was a declaration of economic war and potentially a real war.
In China, it was read by everybody all the way up to the top.
Did the vice president issue any kind of evidence?
As what?
As a harbinger of, something really, really different and something that was really alarming for them.
Why was it alarming for them?
It was a very unnuanced, undiplomatic speech. It was kind of a bill of indictment.
Both China and the United States need to make an effort to make sure that the bilateral relations do not get out of control.
Our message to China's rulers is this: this president will not back down.
The Trump administration was trying to restrict China's access to valuable technology developed by American companies.
First up, though, this morning, the Trump White House announcing a pivot.
Using an existing law related to national emergencies to restrict Chinese investment in sensitive technologies.
He told me about a flood of calls he started receiving from Chinese investors about 5 years ago. He remembered one Chinese investor in particular.
He'd been sent to invest in technology. Could I help? And I said, well, what kind of technology? And he had difficulty answering the question. And if I pushed him hard, clearly in the end, it would be artificial intelligence, semiconductors, maybe things having to do with automotive.
The Chinese government's top priorities.
It's Chinese government's top priorities, right. And then I said, well, how much do you have to invest? And he claimed that he had access to $1 billion.
$1 billion?
Yeah. And then I met a private equity firm that had $15 billion from some entity in the Chinese government.
How much money?
$15 billion.
With a B.
Yeah, and they told me that their only mandate was to invest in semiconductors.
What did you think of that?
I thought, I don't know if this is good.
Our next major war could be fought against China.
This is my optimistic scenario, that we will have a managed tension. But we do have the pessimistic scenario. We do have a chance to see a so-called, I don't like the term, but the new Cold War. I don't think like the one the US have with the USSR, but we will have another type of Cold War that nobody have ever experienced. But I think it's a comprehensive confrontation. That's dangerous. That's really dangerous. And if that happens, it will last for quite a long time. Then that's a tragedy for everyone, I think.